It's too horrible. It's beyond everything. Nothing at all that I know touches it for dreadfulness, for general uncanny ugliness and horror and pain. She was a most charming person, my sister's governess. She was the most agreeable woman I've ever known in her position. She would have been worthy of any whatever. It was long ago, and this episode was long before. I was at Trinity. I found her at home on my coming down the second summer. I liked her extremely, and am glad to this day to think she liked me too. If she hadn't, she wouldn't have told me. She had never told anyone. The youngest of several daughters of a poor country parson, she had, at the age of 20, on taking service for the first time in the schoolroom, come up to London in trepidation to answer in person an advertisement that had already placed her in brief correspondence with the advertiser. This person proved, on her presenting herself for judgment at a house in Harley Street that impressed her as vast and imposing, this prospective patron proved a gentleman, a bachelor in the prime of life, such a figure as had never risen save in a dream or an old novel before a fluttered, anxious girl out of a Hampshire vicarage. He was handsome and bold and pleasant, offhand and gay and kind. He struck her inevitably as gallant and splendid, but what took her most of all and gave her the courage she afterwards showed was that he put the whole thing to her as a kind of favor, an obligation he should gratefully incur. She conceived him as rich but as fearfully extravagant, saw him all in a glow of high fashion, of good looks, of expensive habits, of charming ways with women. He had for his town residence a big house filled with the spoils of travel and the trophies of the chase, but it was to his country home, an old family place in Essex, that he wished her immediately to proceed. He had been left, by the death of their parents in India, guardian to a small nephew and a small niece, children of a military brother whom he had lost 2 years before. It had all been a great worry, and on his own part, doubtless, a series of blunders. But he immensely pitied the poor chicks, and had done all he could, had in particular sent them down to his other house, the proper place for them being, of course, the country, and kept them there from the first with the best people he could find to look after them. He had put them in possession of Bly, which was healthy and secure, and had placed at the head of their little establishment an excellent woman, Mrs. Gross, whom he was sure his visitor would like, but who had formerly been maid to his mother. She was now housekeeper. There were plenty of people to help, but of course the young lady who should go down as governess would be in supreme authority. She would also have in holidays to look after the small boy who had been for a term at school. There had been, for the two children at first, a young lady whom they had had the misfortune to lose. She had done for them quite beautifully. She was a most respectable person, till her death, which had left no alternative but the school for little Miles. Mrs. Gross, since then, in the way of manners and things, had done as she could for Flora. Of course, the prospect struck her as slightly grim. She was young, untried, nervous. It was a vision of serious duties and little company, of really great loneliness. She hesitated, took a couple of days to consult and consider, but the salary offered much exceeded her modest measure, and on a second interview she faced the music, she engaged. It sounded dull, it sounded strange, and all the more so because of his main condition, which was that she should never trouble him, but never, neither appeal nor complain nor write about anything, only meet all questions herself, receive all moneys from his solicitor, take the whole thing over and let him alone.
I remember the whole beginning as a succession of flights and drops, a little seesaw of the right throbs and the wrong. After rising in town to meet his appeal, I had at all events a couple of very bad days. Found myself doubtful again, felt indeed sure I'd made a mistake. In this state of mind I spent the long hours of bumping, swinging coach that carried me to the stopping place at which I was to be met by a vehicle from the house, and I found towards the close of the June afternoon a commodious fly in waiting for me. Driving at that hour on a lovely day through a country to which the summer sweetness seemed to offer me a friendly welcome, my fortitude mounted afresh, and as we turned into the avenue, encountered a reprieve that was probably but a proof of the point to which it had sunk. I suppose I'd expected, or had dreaded, something so melancholy that what greeted me was a good surprise. I remember as a most pleasant impression the broad, clear front, its open windows and fresh curtains, and the pair of maids looking out. I remember the lawn and the bright flowers and the crunch of my wheels on the gravel, and the clustered tree-tops over which the rooks circled and cawed in the golden sky. The scene had a greatness that made it a different affair from my own scant home, and there immediately appeared at the door, with a little girl in her hand, a civil person who dropped me as decent a curtsy as if I'd been the mistress or a distinguished visitor. I was carried triumphantly through the following hours by my introduction to the younger of my pupils. The little girl, who accompanied Mrs. Grose, appeared to me on the spot a creature so charming as to make it a great fortune to have to do with her. She was the most beautiful child I'd ever seen. I slept little that night. I was much too excited. And this astonished me too, I recollect, remained with me, adding to my sense of the liberality with which I was treated. The large, impressive room, one of the best in the house, the great state bed, as I almost felt it, the full-figured draperies, the long glasses in which for the first time I could see myself from head to foot, all struck me, like the extraordinary charm of my small charge, as so many things thrown in. It was thrown in as well, from the first moment, that I should get on with Mrs. Grose, in a relation over which on my way in the coach I fear I had rather brooded. The only thing, indeed, that in this early outlook might have made me shrink again was the clear circumstance of her being so glad to see me. I perceived within half an hour that she was so glad, stout, simple, plain, clean, wholesome woman, as to be positively on her guard against showing it too much. I wondered, even then a little, why she should wish not to show it, and that with reflection, with suspicion, might of course have made me uneasy. But it was a comfort that there could be no uneasiness in a connection with anything so beatific as the radiant image of my little girl, the vision of whose angelic beauty had probably more than anything else to do with the restlessness that, before morning, made me several times rise and wander about my room to take in the whole picture and prospect, to watch from my open window the faint summer dawn, to look at such portions of the rest of the house as I could catch, and to listen while, in the fading dusk, the first birds began to twitter, for the possible recurrence of a sound or two, less natural, and not without but within, that I'd fancied I heard. There had been a moment when I believed I recognized, faint and far, the cry of a child. There'd been another when I found myself just consciously starting, as at the passage before my door of a light footstep. But these fancies were not marked enough not to be thrown off. To watch, teach, form little Flora would too evidently be the making of a happy and useful life. I felt quite sure that she would presently like me. And the little boy, does he look like her? Is he too so very remarkable?
Oh, miss, most remarkable. If you think well of this one,
Yes, if I do.
you will be carried away by the little gentleman.
Well, that, I think, is what I came for, to be carried away. I'm afraid, however, I'm rather easily carried away. I was carried away in London.
In Harley Street.
In Harley Street.
Well, miss, you're not the first, and you won't be the last.
Oh, I've no pretension to being the only one. My other pupil, at any rate, as I understand, comes back tomorrow.
Not tomorrow, Friday, miss. He arrives as you did by the coach under care of the guard, and is to be met by the same carriage.
What I felt the next day was, I suppose, nothing that could be fairly called a reaction from the cheer of my arrival. It was probably at the most only a slight oppression, produced by a fuller measure of the scale, as I walked round them, gazed up at them, and took them in, of my new circumstances. They had, as it were, an extent and mass for which I had not been prepared, and in the presence of which I found myself freshly a little scared as well as a little proud. I had the view of a castle of romance, inhabited by a rosy sprite, such a place as would somehow, for diversion of the young idea, take all colour out of storybooks and fairy tales. Wasn't it just a storybook over which I had fallen a doze and a dream? No, it was a big, ugly, antique, but convenient house, in which I had the fancy of our being almost as lost as a handful of passengers in a great drifting ship. Well, I was, strangely, at the helm. The first day had been, on the whole, reassuring, but I was to see it wind up in keen apprehension. The postbag that evening contained a letter for me, which, however, in the hand of my employer, I found to be composed but of a few words, enclosing another, addressed to himself with a seal still unbroken. This, I recognize, is from the headmaster, and the headmaster's an awful bore. Read him, please, deal with him, but mind you don't report, not a word. I took the unopened missive at last up to my room, and only attacked it just before going to bed. I had better have let it wait till morning, for it gave me a second sleepless night. The next day I was full of distress, and it finally got so the better of me that I determined to open myself at least to Mrs. Gross. What does it mean? The child's dismissed his school.
But aren't they all?
Sent home, yes, but only for the holidays. Miles may never go back at all.
They won't take him.
They absolutely decline.
Oh, what has he done?
Is he really bad?
Do the gentlemen say so?
They go into no particulars. They simply express their regret that it should be impossible to keep him. That can have only one meaning, that he's an injury to the others.
Master Miles? Him an injury?
To his poor little innocent mates.
It's too dreadful to say such cruel things. Why, he's scarce 10 years old.
Yes, it will be incredible.
See him, miss, first, then believe it. You might as well believe it of the little lady, bless her. Look at her.
I take what you said to me at noon as a declaration that you've never known him to be bad.
Oh, never known him. I don't pretend that.
Then you have known him to...
Yes, indeed, miss, thank God.
You mean that a boy who never is
no boy for me.
You like them with a spirit to be naughty. So do I, but not to the degree to contaminate.
To contaminate?
To corrupt.
Are you afraid he'll corrupt you?
What was the lady who was here before?
The last governess. She was also young and pretty, almost as young and almost as pretty, miss, even as you.
Ah, then I hope her youth and her beauty helped her. He seems to like us young and pretty.
Oh, he did. It was the way he liked everyone. I mean, that's his way. The masters.
But of whom did you speak first?
Why, of him.
Of the master?
Of who else?
Did she see anything in the boy
That wasn't right. She never told me.
Was she careful, particular?
About some things, yes.
But not about all?
Well, miss, she's gone. I won't tell tales.
I quite understand your feeling. Did she die here?
No, she went off.
Went off to die? She was taken ill, you mean, and went home?
She was not taken ill so far as appeared in this house. She left it at the end of the year to go home, as she said, for a short holiday. But our young lady never came back, and at the very moment I was expecting her, I heard from the master that she was dead.
But of what?
He never told me. But please, miss, I must get back to my work.
I was a little late on the scene, and I felt, as Miles stood wistfully looking out for me before the door of the inn at which the coach had put him down, that I'd seen him on the instant, without and within, in the great glow of freshness, the same positive fragrance of purity in which I had from the first moment seen his little sister. He was incredibly beautiful, and Mrs. Grose had put her finger on it. Everything but a sort of passion of tenderness for him was swept away by his presence. What I then and there took him to my heart for was something divine that I've never found to the same degree in any child. His indescribable little air of knowing nothing in the world but love. And by the time I'd got back to Bly with him, I remained merely bewildered, so far, that is, as I was not outraged, by the sense of the horrible letter locked up in my room in a drawer. As soon as I could compass a private word with Mrs. Grose, I declared to her that it was grotesque.
You mean the cruel charge?
It doesn't live an instant, my dear woman. Look at him.
I assure you, miss, I do nothing else. What will you say, then?
In answer to the letter? Nothing.
And to his uncle?
Nothing.
And to the boy himself?
Nothing.
Then I'll stand by you. We'll see it out.
We'll see it out. What I look back at with amazement is the situation I accepted. I had undertaken with my companion to see it out, and I was under a charm, apparently, that could smooth away the extent and the far and difficult connections of such an effort. I was lifted aloft on a great wave of infatuation and pity. I found it simple, in my ignorance, my confusion, and perhaps my conceit, to assume that I could deal with a boy whose education for the world was all on the point of beginning. Oh, it was a trap, not designed but deep, to my imagination, to my delicacy, perhaps to my vanity, to whatever in me was most excitable. The best way to picture it all is to say that I was off my guard. They gave me so little trouble. They were of a gentleness so extraordinary. They had the bloom of health and happiness. It may be, of course, above all, that what suddenly broke into this gives the previous time a charm of stillness, that hush in which something gathers or crouches. The change was actually like the spring of a beast. In the first weeks, the days were long. They often, at their finest, gave me what I used to call my own hour, the hour when I had before my final retirement a small interval alone. Much as I liked my companions, this hour was the thing in the day I liked most, and I liked it best of all when, as the light faded, or rather, I should say, the day lingered, and the last calls of the last birds sounded in a flushed sky from the old trees, I could take a turn into the grounds, and enjoy almost with a sense of property that amused and flattered me the beauty and dignity of the place. It was one afternoon, in the middle of my very hour. The children were tucked away, and I'd come out for my stroll. One of the thoughts that used to be with me in these wanderings was that it would be as charming as a charming story suddenly to meet someone. Someone would appear there at the turn of a path and would stand before me and smile and approve. I didn't ask more than that. I only asked that he should know. And the only way to be sure he knew would be to see it, and the kind light of it in his handsome face. That was exactly present to me, by which I mean the face was, when on the first of these occasions, at the end of a long June day, I stopped short on emerging from one of the plantations and coming into view of the house. What arrested me on the spot, and with a shock much greater than any vision had allowed for, was the sense that my imagination had, in a flash, turned real. He did stand there, but high up beyond the lawn and at the very top of the tower to which on that first morning little Flora had conducted me. It produced in me, this figure in the clear twilight, two distinct gasps of emotion, which were, sharply, the shock of my first and that of my second surprise. My second was a violent perception of the mistake of my first. The man who met my eyes was not the person I had precipitately supposed. An unknown man in a lonely place is a permitted object of fear to a young woman privately bred, and the figure that faced me was as little anyone else I knew as it was the image that had been in my mind. I had not seen it in Harley Street. I had not seen it anywhere. The place, moreover, in the strangest way in the world, had on the instant, and by the very fact of its appearance, become a solitude. It was as if, while I took in what I did take in, all the rest of the scene had been stricken with death. I can hear again the intense hush in which the sounds of evening dropped. The rooks stopped cawing in the golden sky, and the friendly hour lost for the minute all its voice. The gold was still in the sky, the clearness in the air, and the man who looked at me over the battlements was as definite as a picture in a frame. He was in one of the angles, the one away from the house, very erect and with both hands on the ledge. So I saw him. Then, exactly after a minute, as if to add to the spectacle, he slowly changed his place, passed, looking at me hard all the while, to the opposite corner of the platform. Yes, I had the sharpest sense that during this transit he never took his eyes from me. And I can see at this moment the way his hand, as he went, passed from one of the crenellations to the next. He stopped at the other corner, but less long, and even as he turned away, still markedly fixed me. He turned away. That was all I knew. Was there a secret at play? A mystery of Udolpho? Or an insane, an unmentionable relative, kept in unsuspected confinement?